What is the deal with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond? I mean, it's crazy to think that it's been roughly 7 months since we last saw that game, the initial gameplay reveal for that game, and the June Direct of last year. Now we're in mid-February. We're right around the 7-month mark at this point since we last saw that game. What is the holdup? Are Retro Studios currently working on a Switch 2 version of the game? Is that why it's taken so long? Will it be a cross-generation release? Or will it stay a Switch 1 game and then we can simply take advantage of the backwards compatibility and play it on Switch 2 maybe with some kind of upgrade in resolution or whatever? What direction is Nintendo really going to go? And it's something we've all been questioning as of late, and it's a very tricky scenario. And here's the thing, I mean, it makes sense to bring it to Switch 2, make it kind of do the Breath of the Wild thing with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, having them both the Switch 1 to take advantage of a 150 plus million install base, and also have it available on the new hardware early on, launch window, something, to serve as a graphical showcase game and to just simply give it the opportunity to sell more. Because the game, without doubt, without question, will sell more if it's on both platforms, the new hardware and the old hardware. It's really that simple. So I think it suits that idea, that notion of being a cross-generation release like Breath of the Wild, like Twilight Princess. Like Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess released on Wii first, and then it came to the GameCube like a month after. Breath of the Wild was simultaneous when it released on both Wii U and Switch. I think Prime 4 would be better off doing that, releasing simultaneous on both Switch 1 and Switch 2. So, and you look at like Retro Studios, if they are in fact working on a Switch 2 version of this game right now, currently, they are not going to prioritize that version of the game over the Switch 1 version, sort of like what the Zelda team did with Breath of the Wild. I mean, Breath of the Wild began on Wii U hardware. It was intended to be a Wii U game only until the Wii U floundered early on, and then they just thought, why just release it on Wii to a very limited install base, and why not have it at launch as the killer app to launch the new hardware, which made a ton of sense. But it began on Wii U hardware. It is a Wii U game at the end of the day. But basically what happened is the Zelda team prioritized the Switch version of Breath of the Wild in the sense that they focused on that more so than its Wii U counterpart. Because the Wii U version of Breath of the Wild, at one point, it had gamepad support. Just like Wind Waker HD, where you could zoom in on the map. They showed it off at the Game Awards. That was really cool. And then they eventually scrapped that and just solely focused on the Switch version and marketed the game as a Switch launch game. And it reached a point where it seemed like it was just a Switch game, right? And great. And it turned out to be a huge hit. And it really sold the Switch right out the gate. I mean, there was a point where more people had copies of Breath of the Wild than actual Switch 1 units, which is absurd. But again, Retro Studios is not going to do that. They will make the Switch 1 version, which Prime 4 began as a Switch 1 game, just like Breath of the Wild was a Wii U game. They will make the Switch 1 version as perfect as they can make it. Whether it's 900p, 60 frames per second, there's been discussion that the game, the footage that we saw back in June, that it was running at 900p, maybe that's the sacrifice they had to make. But nonetheless, it still looks excellent. It's definitely one of the top 10, top 5 maybe, best looking Switch games. Even with that tidbit of footage that we got, the game looks that good. Textures, lighting, we'll see. But obviously a Switch 2 version, you can bump that resolution, you can enhance the lighting, enhance the textures. It definitely could look a lot better, and you could take advantage of the mouse functionality of the Joy-Cons for aiming and shooting. It's almost like a given at this point that they should do that. So I still think there's a high probability that it will be on both systems. Here's the thing that I'm somewhat doubtful of, because a lot of fans at this point are hoping for or believe that both Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Mario Kart 9 could release at the same time. Both games could release on day one of Switch 2. They're drastically different games. One's a racer that appeals to the masses. Another is more niche that appeals to more hardcore Nintendo fans. It's an action-adventure shooter. So genre-wise, they're complete opposites, graphically, aesthetically. It makes sense in that regard, but I'm not so sure Nintendo is going to release both Prime 4 and Mario Kart 9 on the same day. That's still something that, even, it could be in the launch window, or it could even be as late as September or October of this year. It could be a Q4 game. It really could be. The Switch releases in June, and then we get July, August, we get some summer months left over, but before you know it, September, October rolls around. It's still almost in a way considered the launch window. It's just a few months after launch, essentially. You just get through the summer. So I still think there's a high probability that Prime 4 could be a September or an October game. Metroid Dread released in October, could take that same slot. I just don't know. You asked the question, will Mario Kart 9 take away from Metroid Prime 4 Beyond if they release in the same day? I think it could, in the sense that if a lot of early adopters are going into thinking of purchasing Switch 2 day one in one game to go along with the system, because if it's $400, $450, whatever the price point is, you factor in a sales tax, you factor in a game. At this point, we're well over $500. Maybe they want a pro controller. If they're just going into really choosing one game, the majority, I feel, are going to choose Mario Kart 9 over Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I mean, it's really that simple, right? I mean, Mario Kart, at this point, at this stage of the game, it's Nintendo's highest selling IP. It's the most evergreen game they have in their arsenal, surpassing 3D Mario, surpassing 3D Zelda, Smash Brothers, everything. It's Mario Kart. It's Mario Kart now, right? And if you think about it, I mean, yes, we haven't got a new game in over a decade, but when you factor in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, all of the Booster Course DLC that's been implemented, Mario Kart Tour, Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, and even Mario Kart scenes being in the Super Mario Brothers movie, at the end of the day, the IP has gotten a lot of representation during the Switch era, even without a new game in 10 years, if you really add all that up. So it's the most evergreen title they have. It's the biggest seller. It's a no-brainer, essentially, to have the game released day one alongside new hardware. The only kind of thing that's a little different is the fact that it's a huge multiplayer experience day one, unlike a huge single-player experience, like Breath of the Wild was for Switch. Not that that matters, but it's something Nintendo, that really hasn't been a thing on new Nintendo home consoles launches. It's typically that big single-player experience that launches the hardware. So it's a kind of a switch-up, but again, it makes sense. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe will end up being a 70 million seller on Switch 1 when it's all said and done. So I still feel it absolutely should be on both Switch 1 and Switch 2. Not just a backwards compatibility thing, but Retro Studios should actually be working on a port or a version itself of the game. We'll see. Again, I think it'll happen. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is my most anticipated first-party game currently across all platforms. I've said it before, and it's not even close. I'm a huge Metroid fan. Super Metroid is one of my favorites. I loved Metroid Dread after waiting almost 2 decades for that game between Fusion and, it's just ridiculous. That game still feels surreal. Metroid Prime series, I love it. Played a shit ton of the original Metroid on NES. Just a huge fan of the series. It's my most anticipated game. I can't wait. And the question is now, at this point, is when are we going to see it next? As I make this video, it's February 13th. Are we going to get a February Direct? We still could. We still got half of the month to go. Will we see it then? If we don't see it this month, I think it's inevitable that we see it on April 2nd during the Switch 2 presentation, and then get confirmation that the game will in fact be coming to Switch 2. And then we just need a date at that point. And again, I don't want Metroid fans and Nintendo fans getting their hopes up that it will be a day one release right alongside a new Mario Kart, but it could come a little later. It could come September, October, which again, in a way, is still kind of launch window-ish. It's only a few months after. If the system releases in June, you just have July, August, just get through the summer months, and then bang, September, October. It's really early overall in the hardware's life cycle. So we'll see, but that's just a few ideas when it comes to the game. I hope it's cross-gen, because I want this game to sell. It needs to sell. There's a pretty hefty budget overall going into this game. It's been in development for 7 years. It needs to sell quite well. I hope it becomes at least a 5 million seller, and I think it could absolutely achieve that if it's on both Switch 1 and Switch 2. Thanks for listening. Artisan Tube here. Stay tuned for more content in the future. Peace out.